Vail. I think Emily is well known to everybody on this committee also, but just in case, Emily has been the executive director of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance since 2019. She previously served for 8 years as the watershed outreach specialist for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's Hudson River Estuary Program in collaboration with the New York State Water Resources Institute at Cornell University. Her work has supported community-based watershed groups, municipalities, and other partners throughout the region to improve water quality in the Hudson Valley. She holds a BA in Environmental Studies from Vassar College and an MS in Natural Resources from Cornell University. So, Emily, great to see you again. Looking forward to your presentation, and we'll get going. Thanks
Great.
very
Well,
much.
thanks so much for having me. It feels like I think back in the winter, Matt had reached out and scheduled this presentation for November. So it's great to finally be here and give an update on some of our programs. So I'm going to drop a whole bunch of links in the chat just so you have them if you want to follow along. Um, there's a lot to go over, and I want to make sure I can share my screen first of all. Yes. Okay, great. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thanks again, Matt, for the introduction and welcome. My name is Emily Vail. I'm the Executive Director of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance, and I'm going to be talking today about some of our programs on watershed group capacity building. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the Hudson River Watershed Alliance, we're a small nonprofit. We're based in Kingston, New York, but we cover the entire Hudson River watershed, and our mission is to unite and empower communities to protect our shared waters. We do that by supporting watershed groups, helping communities work together on water issues, and communicating as a collective voice. We work on watersheds, and sometimes we get asked why. Why are you so focused on watersheds? Of course, watersheds are the land area where water flows to a specific water body defined by topography, not by political boundaries. And these are really the geographic units best suited to understanding conditions and managing our waters. Watersheds connect people, lands, waters, both upstream and downstream. So they're really good units to use for planning and implementing to protect clean water, flooding, healthy communities, and so on. So the Hudson River watershed is quite large. It's over 13,000 square miles, extending from the Adirondacks all the way down to New York City, including the Upper Hudson watershed, which we heard about at our annual watershed conference a couple weeks ago, the Mohawk River watershed, and of course the Hudson River estuary. And when we look at a watershed of this scale, obviously it's really challenging to manage something of this size. And so we can start to break down smaller watersheds, smaller sub-watersheds to look at each river and stream with its own unique set of conditions, and each river and stream and its connection to the larger watershed ecosystem. So sometimes we get asked what a watershed group is, and it can be a little challenging to define what a watershed group is because they come in so many different shapes, sizes, and forms. But we define a watershed group as a collective of people that are working together locally to protect a specific watershed. So really using that watershed scale boundary is critical, even though we know these may be ad hoc community groups or 501c3 nonprofits, they may be intermunicipal councils, they may have fiscal sponsorship, they may be led by an agency or a nonprofit with some staff support. And so there's a lot of different ways to organize groups depending on what the local challenges or goals may be. And regardless, watershed work is complex and collaboration is key. And that's something we've heard over and over again. Watershed groups play a variety of really important roles. They convene stakeholders, coordinate projects of all kinds, educate residents, promote stewardship projects like cleanups or tree plantings, monitor water quality, partner on research, and create and implement watershed management plans. They focus on all kinds of diverse issues like water quality, which is really central to many groups' work, but also flooding, stream habitat and connectivity, drinking water protection, climate resilience, education, and more. So between 2019 and 2021, the Hudson River Watershed conducted a Hudson River Watershed Alliance conducted a watershed needs assessment with funding from the estuary program. And we used an academic social science methodology to do interviews and focus groups with 56 local and regional partners and had really in-depth conversations, including with some of you, about what watershed groups' strengths, needs, challenges, and opportunities may be. And this needs assessment has really formed the foundation of the Watershed Alliance's strategic plan, programming, and so on. So out of that body of work, and you can see the needs assessment, I put a link in the chat to our website, which houses a lot of the different outcomes of this body of research. But we wrote a watershed needs assessment report, which summarizes our key findings. We have the watershed needs assessment appendix, which is, I think, 200 pages long, but it's direct quotations from watershed groups and regional partners, specifically identifying some of the needs, which is really enlightening information. And we compiled watershed group success stories into our Work on Watersheds report, which is also available as a hard copy at our events and then also on our website. More recently, we published a journal article summarizing the findings in the Journal of Environmental Management in September of 2024. Dr. Michael Finewood from Pace University, also an Alliance board member, was the lead author on this paper titled The Importance of Capacity Building in Watershed Groups, Lessons from the Hudson River Watershed USA. And Michael gave a really fantastic webinar presentation this summer that summarized a lot of the key messages from this paper, which I'm happy to share. A lot of these are linked in the presentation. I'm happy to share a PDF if that's helpful afterwards. So a lot of text. I'm going to read this, but I think it's really fundamental. So watershed groups need capacity. That was the message that we heard from groups over and over in different forms, different language, but that was really a core message. So at the watershed scale, environmental organizations and groups are critical for effective watershed governance, often helping with collaboration, as well as providing municipalities with additional support and resources. Despite the vital role environmental organizations and groups can play, they continue to face challenges. And while watershed groups are generally in need of technical resources, participation, and funding, our research suggests that capacity, such as internal structures, strategic planning, and leadership, is most important for successful and sustainable groups. Therefore, we argue that support for capacity is more likely to help sustain groups and their long-term beneficial impact. So again, what we heard is that we need capacity. And capacity can be a bit of a buzzword. What does that really mean when we're talking about capacity or capacity building? We've defined this as the ability of an organization to get their work done, be effective, or fulfill their mission. So do you have the time, talent, resources, humans to implement your mission? All of that factors into capacity. And there's some different ways to build capacity that are more resource intensive or less, so that it can be scaled to what groups are looking for and what the priorities are. So some of the ways to build capacity are refining group structures and defining roles to work more efficiently. So with your existing group or your existing funding, how can you work more efficiently so those resources go a little further and a little faster? Building and sharing leadership can help expand capacity, so there's clear roles for more people to do different defined tasks, get more work done across a group, and also involving more people and partners. So if a watershed group itself can be supported by external partnerships and collaborative efforts. Watershed groups have a lot of strengths. Many of you are involved with watershed groups and know all about this, but they really collect passionate, knowledgeable, and committed people. They have really diverse set of accomplishments, which you can see in the Work on Watersheds report. They build relationships and share really unique local knowledge. We say they have boots on the ground, but also waders in the water. They engage communities in meaningful ways. And they're also really able to use scientific expertise and resources and apply that science directly to on-the-ground conditions. So the Hudson River Watershed Alliance has been doing quite a lot of work with planning for watershed groups to build capacity in the ways that we heard were needs. So we've been really focused on identifying and building consensus around goals and roles as a way to streamline operations, move things along, and identify more partnerships that may bring additional resources. So we've been doing this in two ways. both external watershed planning and internal watershed group planning. And I'll talk about each of those now. So, watershed planning is a process that brings people together from across geographic boundaries and sectors to understand what the watershed needs. So, for example, this photos from the Sparkhill Creek Watershed Characterization Community presentation. If there was a watershed plan for the Sparkhill, it would be, what does the watershed need? And taking perspectives and people and expertise to really understand current watershed conditions, set goals for future conditions, and identify strategic actions to get from the present to the future that all kinds of different entities might take, whether it's the local government or a watershed group, maybe the state agency plays a role, local residents, and so on. Understanding current conditions is really the focus of the watershed characterization process, which is an opportunity to compile information from all different sources together into one report to tell the watershed story and provide an important foundation for planning. Watershed characterizations can be used to engage new folks who are just maybe learning about some of the scientific background or water quality conditions, and they can be a really useful tool in grounding key goals in those local conditions, looking at present and future. So in 2024, we did a big watershed characterization project working with two small watersheds in the Hudson Valley, with the Punch Brook Roloff Jansenkill watershed in Columbia County as our rural case study, and Rockland County's own Sparkhill Creek watershed as our urban case study. And I know several of you were involved with that Sparkhill Creek process, so thank you. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at the Sparkhill Creek watershed characterization, it's up on our website. I dropped the link in the chat, and it's got a series of really beautiful maps, compilation of tons of information, really downloading data from hard drives all across Rockland County and the region, and finally pulling it all together, organizing it into a framework that hopefully can make all that data really easy to find, depending on what the different priorities and future directions may be. So that's watershed planning, external facing. What does the watershed need? We've also been taking a closer look at internal planning, watershed group planning, which is a process that brings together watershed group members and partners to understand more specifically what the watershed group needs. And we can use a similar kind of framework of understanding current conditions, setting goals for future conditions, and identifying strategic actions to get from the present to the future. But in this case, we're really looking at the watershed group as its own organization, entity. What kind of systems are in place or should be in place? How can we better support the watershed group in taking those really specific actions that a watershed group can lean on its strengths, can really implement next steps? So we offered two different tracks of watershed group capacity building programs in 2025, which I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the presentation. The first one was direct technical assistance with facilitators to create a strategic work plan. And for this program offering, we had an application for technical assistance to help us identify which groups were really well suited to this opportunity. So in part, that was, are the group's needs scaled to what we're offering for this program? Some of it was really understanding steps taken to date on how far along these groups were. And we had, I think, something like 10 to 12 applications for 4 spots. So we picked 4 watershed groups to participate in that program. Almost at the same time, we offered a self-guided learning cohort for watershed groups to work through modules on organizational development on their own, and then come together as a cohort to talk through, ask questions, learn more together. So many of the groups that were not selected for the direct technical assistance actually participated in the self-guided learning cohort, which was a great opportunity that we never want to say no to watershed group needs. We always want to find what the right program fit might be for any group at any given time. And that self-guided learning cohort is what Nicole participated in on behalf of the Rockland County Water Task Force and presented some of those outcomes, which is really, really exciting to see. But first, an overview of the Direct Technical Assistance Program. So we had 4 watershed groups work with the Hudson River Watershed Alliance and 2 facilitators from Strong Outcomes and Shad Bush Consulting. And each group developed a 2-year strategic work plan and, with our help, implemented one organizational development project as a first step. There were lots of post-it notes collected as part of this process, and this was supported by the Hudson River Estuary Program, NUEPIC, through the New York State Environmental Protection Fund. So you might be asking, what is a strategic work plan? We sort of made this up as a more streamlined way to do some strategic style planning with watershed groups. And the product is a document with priority actions for the group to take over the next 1 to 2 years. And one of the challenges that we kept hearing from groups is that we have so much information at our fingertips. There's so many challenges in our watersheds that we could be working on. What should we do now? What should we do first? How can we come up with an order of operations that's logical for next steps? So this document, the work plan itself, includes a mission. We did mission work with each of the 4 groups and some key context around current conditions, and then organized objectives with specific timeframes under 3 goals: address water issues, engage community, and build a sustainable organization. So all 4 groups use those 3 types of objective or goals to frame their objectives, but each of their objectives were different depending on what kinds of water issues they were working on solving, how they wanted to prioritize community engagement, and what the next steps for their particular group might be in organizational development. So that's the product, but the process took about 5 months for groups to articulate goals, consider strategies, and build consensus on next actions. So they did this by first a survey using the organizational development checklist that Nicole mentioned. We had a kickoff meeting, a long afternoon of in-person visioning, and a follow-up virtual meeting or 2 just to make sure that everyone was on the same page about the priorities. Our process goals were to help develop cohesion, bring everyone together, help the groups have a sense of direction so they had clarity on next steps, improve efficacy and efficiency, and really build confidence and make sure that people were confidently taking actions. That was something that we heard from groups is, I think I'm supposed to do this, but I'm not sure, and is it okay, and who do I need to check with? And that really, this process, I think, really helped define a lot of those challenges. So the strategic work plan is not a full strategic plan. Or what we might think of as a full strategic plan that many of us in nonprofits may have experience with, or agencies. It's a more narrow scope and timeline, and it really focuses on short-term next steps and thinking about the roles that watershed groups in particular should be playing. This process and product was really inspired in part by the Wallkill River Watershed Alliance's science-based action plan. This was a little larger project that took information from past watershed plans, took current priorities, and framed it into a similar product in part. Part 4 was very similar to the strategic work plan. So I think there's different models out there now for more streamlined, slightly more involved, and then of course really involved strategic planning. But we know that not any of these might be the right fit for any one group. So now we have more options for more different types of groups and their needs. So after the strategic work plan process, each watershed group implemented one priority action with support from Hudson River Watershed Alliance staff, and that took an additional month. And the reason I want to share the timelines is that sometimes strategic planning takes 2 years, sometimes it takes 3 or 4 years. This can be a really involved process, and we didn't want to bog anyone down. We wanted to be really streamlined, really efficient with this, just getting a starting point, and this implementation action took about 1 month. And so we worked with the watershed groups to figure out what that first step could be. And for each of the groups, it was something like defining organizational structure and roles. One of the groups got a budgeting tool and a spreadsheet to help them look at income and expenses. We also created a membership agreement, which I'll talk a little bit more in depth about. So the Fallkill Watershed Coalition is a group that I worked with on this membership agreement. And our goals here were really to engage existing members and recruit new members. So we needed more people at the table with more clear roles. And we needed to define who is a member. How do we know who a member is? If we're recruiting new members, we should be clear that we're looking to the right people for recruitment. How are members expected to participate? So new members might ask, what do you want from me? What does that mean? What's the time commitment? That kind of thing. And we also, with the Fallkill Watershed Coalition, had questions around learning together versus implementing projects together. And so if there's alignment between partners within the coalition, how can we improve project-based collaboration of members so we can have these spin-off opportunities of more collaborative work? So the membership agreement that we put together includes an introduction to the Fallkill Watershed and the coalition, some group agreements that define values of the group and thinking through how do we want to work together. The, the agreement collects contact information, which is really important for follow-up. It asks the person filling out that agreement, why are they interested in the Fallkill watershed? What's their experience? Why would they like to be a part of this coalition? And then it really dug more deeply into expectations of participation. We had a list of member expectations that we defined with a bunch of different great resources that are out there. We defined some ways that members might expect to benefit from their participation because, of course, people with their own limited time are going to say, what's in it for me? Reasonably ask that question. The expectations of participation also ask what resources can you share with the group and what resources would you like to receive? And for those of you that are at our annual conference a couple of weeks ago, the Good Work Institute shared out a model for looking at giving and getting and looking at different forms of abundance. So we actually adapted that model and looked at what resources group members can bring. Maybe it's things like grant writing, time to participate in events, um, maybe it's expertise, it's scientific expertise or local experience or connections to local governments and so on. So really a broad list of different ways that people can contribute and also better understanding motivations to participate. What would you like to receive out of this? And then lastly, there was a part of the form that included leadership interests and opportunities so that we could define more leadership roles, spread that burden out across more people. So I'm happy to talk about more of any of this, but just wanted to give you a sense of what that, when we talk about what a organizational development project might look like and how it might help groups take that initial step to move forward. Okay, over to the self-guided learning cohort. This was the program that Nicole talked about. We had 8 watershed groups work with the Hudson River Watershed Alliance and River Network over a period of 4 months. River Network created and shared modules once a month, were then followed by a live Zoom session for discussion, Q&A, and support. Our colleague Hannah Maiko from River Network, which is a national scale organization that does this kind of work, Hannah also provided office hours for groups to have one-on-one support and talk through any challenges, get feedback on different aspects of what they were working on, which we heard was really, really valuable for the folks that took advantage of this. And this program was supported by the Hudson River Estuary Program grant with support from the New York State Environmental Protection Fund. After both of those programs, we brought everyone together at the Hudson River Watershed Alliance's office in Kingston for a big watershed roundtable to compare notes, continue working through next steps, and learn from each other. So I just want to give a thank you to all of the groups that participated in this, both the cohort 8 groups, the technical assistance 4 groups, and all of our partners that contributed the content, the funding, the support to make this happen. So as Nicole mentioned, all of our self-guided resources are now available on our website, and we really encourage you to take a look and check those out. We have checklists for organizational development and growth. We have videos, worksheets, templates for organizational development on mission, leadership models, roles and recruitment, and budgets and work plans. And what we're hearing, let me see if I have it on the next slide. Yeah, so this is what our website looks like. So episode 1 is the organizational health checklist and mission statements. We've got some worksheets to help people work on mission statement, values, vision. We've got a video. All of the videos are about 10 to 20 minutes long, so really short, really highlighting the key information, and then PDFs of the slides for reference if you need more the visual of the presentation. And we've been getting great feedback about just how efficient these tools are. They're really targeted. And while they're of course, useful for watershed groups, designed for watershed groups. We think they can be useful for organizations of all different shapes and sizes. So we've been sharing these out with new watershed groups that are forming, particularly the mission statement worksheet, which helps get everyone on the same page around what work we're actually doing. They've also been shared out nationally with partners in Pennsylvania and the Chesapeake Bay watershed and also the Great Lakes. So we're really excited to see how far these streamlined tools can really go in helping groups. So a couple lessons learned, and I just again want to celebrate the Rockland County Water Task Force for all of your outcomes. I think that's a perfect illustration of how a little bit of planning support can really go quite a long way in helping groups grow as organizations, implement next steps, and as Matt said, go from walking to hopefully a full-on sprint. And again, what we keep hearing, there's so many demands and challenges, and there's also a lot of opportunities out there with limited time of watershed groups. What is the best use of our time? And so I think that these kinds of processes can really help set those priorities to be efficient, to be strategic. And in terms of the process as well, our colleagues at the Good Work Institute talk a lot about making the implicit explicit. And that was really foundational to this program as well. When we come together in groups of all kinds, there may be assumptions that we're making about perhaps what roles people are playing or motivations of people at the table or how the group is organized, or should the group focus on project implementation versus information sharing? And so a lot of the focus of this work was to get those assumptions out on the table and build consensus across the groups to make sure that everyone's really on the same page and able to work together. So some next steps from the Hudson River Watershed Alliance, we are going to be having some follow-up conversations to continue to better understand watershed group planning priorities, both internal planning, like the strategic work plans, and also external planning, like those watershed management plans. We're going to be developing some lists from watershed groups based on what kind of plan you might want to see, if any. Maybe you're just ready to go on implementation, and that's great too. We're also prepping a second round of training from River Network. There'll be some more educational modules that they'll be putting together between now and next spring. And we submitted a grant, and that's pending, to develop 4 more strategic work plans for watershed groups because we got such great feedback from our partners on that process. So watershed groups can't do it alone. We all have limited resources, whether it's people, volunteers, staff, time, materials, funding. And one of our key messages, too, from all of this work is that watershed groups need partnerships. They need support from all of the other entities, county agencies, soil and water, planning departments, academic institutions, state agencies, land trusts, the list goes on. And how can we increase our collective capacity by finding aligned goals, right fit roles, and the people with time, expertise, and ability to take action? And how can we work together more efficiently and effectively to implement those planning priorities to improve clean water, reduce risk of flooding, and have healthy communities? So this year's annual Watershed Conference, which many of you participated in, really focused on these questions. Our theme was collaborating across boundaries. And there's a lot of great insight from the conference and the various presenters, but I wanted to call out one particular resource that's available online, which is the Partnership Learning Project. This was developed from watershed groups in the state of Oregon and really provides some frameworks and language around partnerships. So different types of partnerships, whether it's learning, project, planning, or systems that take different resources, take different levels of coordination. There's examples of stressors, but also elements of resilience to improve success. And what I love about this framework, we use this framework with the Fallkill Watershed Coalition's membership agreement as well, is that it also provides examples of higher performance partnership types across the different board, across the board. So for example, for the Fallkill, they're really a learning oriented partnership, but their original mission statement had them as a project-oriented partnership. So we revamped the mission and reorganized some of the group structures to really lean into the strengths of a learning-oriented partnership and have a really strong learning goals while also having the opportunities for projects to emerge and then roll off and be their own discrete projects. So really encourage the link for the Partnership Learning Project Brief Guide is also in the chat. Really encourage you to take a look at this as a pretty short but very impactful framework for how we can improve how we talk about these things, again, to make that implicit a little bit more explicit. Capacity, in addition to just getting work done, is also about resilience in the face of changes. And our goals for our watersheds and our water resources really include long-term projects for clean water, healthy ecosystems, and resilient communities. So watershed groups need to sustain over time, partnerships need to sustain over time, and weather many changes, whether those are changes in leadership or partners or funding priorities. There's just so much in flux all the time. And so one of our key questions is how can we meet the moment together? How can we identify those shared goals, build strong partnerships, support watershed groups, and leverage the strengths that they have so that we can make the most of our time and resources and enjoy our clean water? So this photo is from the Marbletown Water Quality Study. Again, this was featured as a case study in our conference that we thought was really effective as an example of a watershed scale planning project that then created some priority projects that resulted in innovative partnerships that are now leveraging their respective strengths to get great work done in support of reopening an access site and bathing beach on the lower Sopus Creek in Ulster County. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. Hopefully, this was helpful or interesting. And if you have any questions, happy to take them. Also happy to, again, share any of the links that might be helpful. And thanks so much.
Emily, thank you. I think yeah. So, wow. So I'll start real quick here. You've got a huge watershed area total. How many, I'm going to say tiny, for lack of a better word, watershed groups are there in your huge watershed?
That's a great question. And I think that right now, what's really exciting is that many groups that were very active previously are starting to reform. So I think maybe approximately 15 or so, let's say. Some groups that are just reforming, some new groups are starting, some longer term groups are still chugging along.
How did COVID, did it help? Did it hurt? Did it, um, how'd you manage through COVID?
Yeah, so I think COVID was really, really challenging for community-based watershed groups. And I think, many of you have participated in those. They were so focused on in-person meetings, volunteer opportunities, these kinds of really in-person connected types of activities. And so I think COVID, with all of the challenges that all of us faced through that time, really put a strain on watershed groups. Some groups paused, some groups dropped in capacity, and now I think it's a really great opportunity to do the kind of capacity building work that we're doing because it's a fresh start to think through in this new era where virtual tools are so useful, right? I used to come to these water quality coordinating committee meetings in person, and now I can come virtually. That can be really helpful to connect people across a really large region. So I think that's a really positive outcome of some of the COVID adaptations. Um, and yeah, using all of the tools that are at our resources.
Yeah, COVID seemed to throw a wrench in everything for sure. But in one way, it got a lot of people outside. So I was wondering if that kind of just got people more out in nature, so to speak. Um, how like funding, especially with, I mean, federally, it seems like the climate is not all that great when it comes to environmental flooding, funding rather. How you doing with funding?
Well, I would say that as a small nonprofit, we're gearing up for our year-end appeal, and funding is always a challenge for us, but we've been really, I think, blessed to work with such great partners at the state level, particularly the Hudson River Estuary Program. We had a meeting earlier this week with folks from the DEC Division of Water and Department of State and New York State, and particularly with the Bond Act, has put so much great funding and resources towards these kinds of programs and projects. So I think we're really in a good position in New York State to hopefully continue many of these programs and build off that past success.
How how big are you? How many employees do you have?
One.
One. Okay. Yeah, we were it's hard to do I'm going to say a real lot, for lack of a better word, strictly with volunteers. And the burnout seems to be something of a issue for sure. And trying to keep the slow and steady is one major issue I would think with watersheds. You know, the other major issue that I would think is time, in that to get results takes time, to have measurable results where you could actually say, yes, we fixed this so-called problem. So I don't know if do you find that also?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges is that these are really long-term problems. Our water quality problems, someone said to me once, are the cumulative impact of hundreds of years, and we can't expect to solve them in a 2 to 5 year grant period, right? But we can start the process, we can start to make improvements. And so I think that that's where watershed groups are so valuable because you can take some initial steps, early successes that then can leverage and build more confidence, partnerships, funding, resources to keep the ball rolling. But the groups themselves need to survive all of those changes and, changes in volunteers, people move, people retire. There's all kinds of different changes that happen. And so that's one of our goals is to really make sure that we're maintaining that institutional knowledge that watershed groups have. And the Watershed Characterization Project is a really great way to do that, to formalize some of that institutional knowledge, but also make sure that the groups themselves are well positioned to continue that work, even if the people involved change over time.
Right, right. Does anybody else have any questions that they would like to shoot to Emily? Well, I'd like to say thanks for all that you're doing for everybody out there. I know we spoke a little while ago. It was actually quite a while ago, I guess, with the kind of like a good problem to have, that you had more people asking for help than you could actually provide. So in one sense, it was good that there were that many people and that many watersheds looking. But the bad part is funding, I'm sure, to be able to help as many as needed. Um, and it's kind of, I think everybody knows this too, but when it gets to water, and with everything with Nicole and Ariana and this water task group and what you're doing, I think it's been a while now since I've been involved a little bit with water issues. And I think I was very surprised when I very first got involved in it, how many things are related to water. I mean, when you think about it, everything is related to water, from manufacturing. I remember in the drought days, swimming pools, ornamental ponds. I mean, people washing cars and car services or washing services and that kind of thing. It's like all of a sudden, and all the manufacturing processes and the air cooling processes and all of the ways that water is used, it's mind-boggling. So to try and have nice clean water is pretty darn important. I think I started one seminar that I was doing with, there's only one more thing important than water. Like I think with water you could live, what, 3, 4 days, maybe a week. I don't know. But the only one I could come up with was air. I said I can hold my breath for maybe a minute if I'm lucky, and then after that I'm in trouble. But once you get past air, I think water is the most important resource we have. So anyway, I'm blabbing on, and thanks for everything that everybody does with this and being in the everybody being involved with the water quality committee too. So thank you very much. If there's anybody got any other questions for Emily? Otherwise, we'll continue with our, got a couple little things to do from a business standpoint. Um, Hearing none, again, Emily.